warming and the politics of all that, and then we'll go to cancel culture with you, Sacks.
California has 33 million acres of forest land. It's about 100 million acres in total land. So forests make up about a third of our land. So far, we're burning 3.5 million, so about 10% of our acres. When we burn an acre, we release about 15% of the carbon that's stored in that acre into the atmosphere. So thus far, if you do the math on that, we've released about as much CO2 as the California cars release in a year by the wildfires. And the politics we're seeing play out. So it's a significant problem. But over the last 40 years, we've added about a quarter ton of carbon to each acre per year. And the reason we've done that is we haven't kind of, lit fires and managed the forests and cut down trees. And there's been all these restrictions in California. So there's an argument that some are making that this is about forest management. And then there's an argument that others are making that this is about climate change and dry weather and hot weather causing the fires. And the reality is it's both. But it's, as everything else in this country right now, becoming highly politicized. Trump visited Newsom in a very kind of symbolic gathering this week. I don't know if you guys saw the packet that was handed out to Trump. It was awesome. It was like 24-point font, and it was like
4 words.
It was like
bad.
Yeah,
Water
fire
good. Temperature up. Weather
right.
hot.
Fire is burning state. It was like, and it was. I mean, you guys got to see it. It's awesome. The little packet he got,
awesome.
and then Newsom sat like exactly 6 feet from him with a mask on, and Trump sitting there without the mask on. I mean, it's such a fucking political circus. I think all things are true and all things are false, and we can move on.
Well, the debate on the fires is, I mean, the debate has become sort of climate change versus forest management. That's sort of the debate about it. And like most of these debates, you don't necessarily have to choose. There can be an element of truth on both sides. Regardless of how much climate change has caused these fires, we've done a very, very poor job in the state managing them. And, this idea that we can just fix global warming or wait, not have good forest management until, and just kind of wait for global warming to be fixed is, that's a really stupid idea. So regardless of how much climate change is to the cause of this, I think we need a much more competent state reaction to the fact these fires.
Do you believe in global warming, David Sacks?
I believe in the greenhouse gas theory, and that it's, that man-made CO2 emissions are going to have an impact on the environment. I think that, what's a little bit hard to know is the exact timing and magnitudes of some of these things. But I agree with what Elon said, which is that we're running a very high-risk experiment here, continually putting out, CO2 greenhouse gases into the atmosphere.
Why is it so difficult for the Republican Party? And I feel like you're almost straining and couching your words there, David, that you believe in global warming, you believe in what Elon's saying is not worth doing this risk. Why do Republicans seem to have such an aversion to just saying, hey, global warming's a thing and we need to fix it?
Because Democrats wrapped those words around them like a flag, and so it became a political issue, like with everything else.
I mean, I think so. Again, we have this false choice now of whether you want to save the environment or save the economy, and the problem is, I think that a lot of Republicans don't want to concede the issue. Oh, hey, little guy. A lot of Republicans don't want to concede the issue because they're afraid it'll lead to something like the Green New Deal. And so what we need to do is figure out some responses to the problem that don't require us to destroy the economy.
Right. And for you, if we did incentives, if the country spent incentive Sacks to get solar on roofs and stuff like that, you wouldn't be opposed to it, would you?
You mean like taxing carbon emissions?
Or just giving discounts on putting solar in, subsidizing solar for people's houses, or maybe the middle ground of creating more nuclear reactors, which seems like something that neither party can agree to.
Hold on, little guy. Sorry, I got. Hey,
got a little.
I'm doing a podcast, okay? Sorry.
No problem.
Yeah. Look, I think to the extent that carbon emissions are an externality, the traditional way of dealing with this is you would internalize the externality by placing some sort of tax or penalty on that. But so look, would I rather tax carbon emissions than something else? Yes. I mean, but the only way you're going to get something like that through is if you agree to something like a 1-for-1 tax reduction in other areas, right? Because there's this other larger debate about whether, what else should be taxed.
What about you, Chamath? What are your thoughts on solving global warming and this polarized sort of Republican Democrat? If you believe in global warming, you're not a Republican.
I think that this is the most correlated thing with a healthy economy, because I think that whoever solves climate change, or the set of solutions that solve climate change, first of all, they'll be unbelievably economically successful. They will employ enormous numbers of people, and they'll have a really profound legacy in the world. So the question is how to do it. And I think the problem is right now there's as David, I think, actually puts the best lens on the topic, which is right now we don't even have enough canonical data so that there's a single source of truth that we can all rely on. And not having to judge it as climate change, I think, is an important step, which would just mean having a longitudinal measurement of temperature. And, having a longitudinal measurement of everything from PM 2.5 to PM 10 to, carbon, methane, all of the other normal sort of emissions, nitrous oxide, all this stuff, so that then you can just understand what men and women as part of the human race are doing to fuck with the counterfactual. Because the counterfactual is if we were just like living normal, chill lives. And so once you understand that, then you can figure out how to at least mitigate that back to what the counterfactual would have been, or do it even better. I think the best thing, again, we talked about this in a pod a couple weeks ago, or a couple months ago. The best thing the governments can do is introduce incentives. And I think the most meaningful incentives here are not at the consumer level, but they're more upstream. So, if you take something like cement, cement, which is responsible for, I think, 20% of all the carbon emissions, is a really pernicious industry because, they are very local. They operate within 300 local kilometers of every place where you ship cement to make concrete and whatnot. And when you look at sort of where the emissions are, they're at a very specific part of the chain, which is effectively impossible to mitigate. So you have to have a level of material science improvement to really move things away from cement altogether. Well, just knowing that, you're going to have the incentives that a government creates to pull that forward. Another example is when you look at like manufacturing, all the shit that we all love. I don't care whether you like fucking normal pants or hemp pants. When you go back and you look at how H&M makes those pants, there's our high temperature processes that are burning fossil fuels. They're emitting all kinds of really terrible junk into the environment. And so it doesn't matter whether you're vegan per se. You're not going to go around unclothed. You're not going to not use spoons, right? So all of that, the totality of all of that, we need to completely reinvent high temperature manufacturing. That's not going to happen unless the government steps in, because, like, for example, take something as simple as steel.
It's a tragedy of the commons, right? I mean, basically, is if no individual can make a major impact, maybe they won't. Friedberg, do you think we have all the technology we need to do this, and it's really just a matter of incentives and deployment right now in terms of global warming or stemming global warming? Is that a correct statement, that we have the technology, we just haven't deployed it?
Correct. And I think it's
100% correct. Okay, unpack it.
Well, what I will say is we have the science, the engineering, and the resourcing, and then the market are the kind of unresolved, right? And so resourcing is capital. The market can be created artificially by putting in place government subsidies or having the government be a customer, or you just have to wait a long enough period of time. If you listen to the Tim Ferriss interview with Koch, which one was it? Charles Koch. He talks about how ultimately consumers will vote with their dollars if climate change is real and global warming is starting to have an effect on planet Earth. And we're seeing that, right? We're seeing people make a switch to a vegetarian diet. We're seeing people buy Teslas. We're seeing people make choices for sustainability. So the free market is resolving and will resolve climate change, is the argument that some libertarians might make. And then I think
is that true in your mind, Friedberg? Do you buy that?
I think it's. I'll be honest with you. I've been fucking shocked by how many people are choosing to pay a premium for vegetarian meat alternatives. I was wrong on this. I bet against these companies 8 years ago. I didn't bet against them, but I chose not to bet for them because I made the argument consumers will only buy stuff that's cheaper and taste as good, and I was wrong. millions of consumers are going to Burger King and buying a veggie burger now, which wasn't the case. And we're seeing this across the world.
And they're doing this out of a crisis of consciousness, right? Like they're saying.
That's right. It's a behavioral change.
Wow.
Because that's what they want in the market. That's what they want to spend their money on. They want to spend their money on having a nicer world. It's just like when people will spend a premium amount of money on a nice suit, it makes them look good and feel good. It's the same sort of notion. I feel good when I'm buying a Tesla. I feel good when I'm buying a veggie burger instead of a meat burger, knowing that it is harming my people around me.
I couldn't bring myself to buy a carbon-based ICE engine. Recently, I was thinking about, if I'm in Tahoe and I need to go off-road or there's snow conditions, I need to have a car for it. And I'm picking up the Model Y with the dual engine and putting snow tires on it, as opposed to getting the new,
right.
Jeep Wrangler or the new Defender.
But whether it's biomanufacturing or, synthetic meats, or I think we're not just in a point where we have to create luxury markets. I think we are going to disrupt commodity markets. And I think we're going to do that this decade. And it's going to blow people's fucking mind when everything you're eating looks, tastes, and feels the same, and it's cheaper, and it was just made in a more sustainable way using bioengineering, which is kind of, the ability to write the physical world with software, except it's realized through genomics. And it's an incredible thing that we're
How much of this is the generational shift? I mean, Gen X seemed pretty absorbed with our own projects and a little bit of consciousness, but these millennials are now getting into their 30s, and they're 35 years old, the oldest millennials, and they seem to be incredibly focused on the environment and doing what's right. This is a generational shift in your mind, Friedberg?
No, I think this is just the slow march of humanity's ability to master our world and technology. And, look, let me just give you a scenario. Chamath kind of says we're going to decarbonize the atmosphere. If we could build an algae or a seaweed from scratch or using some basis and use software to resolve what's the right sort of seaweed to create that will grow like crazy in the oceans. When it gets heavy, it sinks to the bottom of the ocean, and it literally just pulls carbon out of the atmosphere and drops to these 40,000 foot deep or 4,000 foot deep kind of wells we have already built around 70% of planet Earth. We have the tools to do that. Again, the engineering and the capital to do that, and then the market for, is there a market for that? It doesn't, if governments are like, it's a crisis, let's put $1 billion into this like we did in the Apollo program, we will get that done in 5 years. I mean, there's no shortage of tools and science to be able to resolve that sort of a problem today, much like we're about to produce a coronavirus